command post. You know what it is. Post up and take command. I, of course, am your commander-in-chief, Louie T, and this is a special edition of the Command Post as we are recapping the 2022 NFL draft of the Washington Commanders, the very first draft and draft class of the new iteration of this organization as the Commanders. And so a lot of intrigue surrounding this draft, a lot of highs and lows, peaks and valleys from a lot of fans out there in terms of their emotions going through this entire draft class, starting with trading back and then getting Jahan Dotson and kind of feeling like that wasn't good enough value after what was available at 11. And then the second round pick left a lot to be desired for a lot of people, including myself. And then you get to the third round pick and you really like that pick. You like the physicality. You like the impetus behind the pick. All right. And then you get to day number 3 and you started off with the safety. Then you trade out of one of your fourth round picks. And then you ultimately end up with quarterback in the 5th round, Sam Howell, and it really elevated the spirits of a lot of people who were kind of on the fence, lukewarm about the draft. And then from there, they finished up just filling a bunch of different holes and needs on this team from a depth perspective and even getting some quality there with one of their picks, maybe 2 of those picks. So at the end of the day, it was an 8-player draft for Washington. That's the number. That was the magic number that I told you guys they were trying to come out of this draft with, was 8. I had 8 in one of my mock drafts with trades. Obviously, they were going to trade in this draft because they weren't going to come out of this draft with just the 6 picks that they went into it with. And so I had 8 picks that they were going to make. They made 8 picks in this draft. They made 2 separate trades. We'll talk about both of those trades when we get to those destinations within this draft breakdown. However, let's go through this draft, talk about how we got to the point where we got to, talk about each and every single player selected and what I think about these players and what I think this player will bring to the table and how they fit into what Washington ultimately is looking to do on the offensive or defensive or special teams sides of the football. With that said, Washington's first draft pick in this draft came via trade. Washington sat at 11 to start this draft off. They wanted to move back, pick up draft capital. They were able to do that. They traded back from 11 to 16. That's what I did in my mock draft with New Orleans. So I actually got that right. And so New Orleans came up. They took Chris Olave. We talked about this on the draft party, day number 2. I had some intel from someone that was in the draft war room or someone that knew someone that was in the draft war room and gave me some intel and some insight into what Washington really looked like and really what their wide receiver board looked like in the first round. And Jahan Dotson was a lot higher on their board than we had anticipated. So they got the guy that they were looking to get. New Orleans gave up the 16th pick, so Washington and New Orleans swapped 11 and 16. Then New Orleans gave up 98 overall, which was a 3rd round selection. Washington went into the draft not having a 3rd round pick due to the Carson Wentz trade in the offseason. And Washington also was able to recoup a 4th round pick from the Saints in that deal, 120. Washington already had the 113th pick in the draft, so 7 picks later, Washington would be on the clock again. They would take that 120th pick, package it up with their 6th round pick to get 2 5s. We'll talk about that a little bit later on in the draft. But with that 16th pick, Washington traded back, selected wide receiver Jahan Dotson out of Penn State. So if you are a member of the MOBB, you have already heard a lot of what I'm about to say because we went through the wide receiver position. We broke down the position itself. I talked about my top 7 receivers in this draft class, and Jahan Dotson was number 4 on my list of receivers. And honestly, I think Washington had him at number 4 on their board. I've talked about what the board looked like for Washington, that I think Drake London, USC wide receiver who was drafted 8th overall by the Atlanta Falcons, was the clear number 1 on Washington's board. It wasn't close. And had he been there at 11, Washington wouldn't have traded back with New Orleans. They would have taken Drake London at 11. However, he wasn't there. They loved Garrett Wilson as well. Not as much as Drake London, but they would have taken Garrett Wilson, and there was a chance they would have stayed at 11. I don't know, and I can't say this for certain. I can say this for certain with Drake London. They would have stayed at 11. They would not have traded back. With Garrett Wilson, had he been available, I'm not sure if they would have stayed at 11. They might have still traded back. They really liked him a lot, though. He was second on their board. Chris Olave was third, and then Jahan Dotson was fourth. So I think it's kind of similar to the way I saw things. I had Dotson on my board as fourth, and that's where Washington had him as well. And they take him at 16. This is a guy that I talked about. Really, there aren't many flaws in his game. The only thing that he lacks is size. And I said this in the MOBB live stream, that if he were 6'2", if he were 6'1", we'd be talking about him as potentially the first receiver off the board in this draft. That's how talented Jahan Dotson is. The only knock on him is that he's 5'11", 178. So you're talking about a small, diminutive wide receiver. That said, his skill set is off the charts. He's explosive. He ran a 4.43. He can get vertical and go attack the football in the air. I think one of his biggest traits and attributes is his hands. He's got the best hands in this draft class. I've talked about that numerous times on various occasions, that his hands are second to none to anyone in this draft class. I've talked about his ability to attack the football in the air. He can go and get it, climb the ladder. As a smaller receiver, it's rare to see guys go and attack the football in the air. A lot of smaller receivers like to let the ball come to them. He's one of those guys that goes and gets it. We've seen the ridiculous one-handed grabs that he's made, whether you're talking Ohio State back in 2020 or you're talking about, a grab that he had. I want to say it was against Michigan. It might have been against Michigan State. It was one of those games where he goes up, climbs the ladder. You're like, whoa. So there's so many different layers to his game. The acceleration, run after catch. I think that's one of the things I'm most excited about with Jahan Dotson is the run after catch, because here in Washington, we don't have a lot of run after catch demons. We have a lot of guys that can go get the football, but after they have it, there's not a lot of creativity. And so he's one of those guys that can make you miss. That's why I was so excited about Curtis Samuel, because he was one of those guys, you get it into his hands and you get him in space, and then it could be trouble for the opposition. Well, we really didn't get to see that last year because Terry isn't a guy that makes you miss. He's not a guy that is very creative ball after run after catch. Neither is Cam Sims, and so we haven't had a lot of that here. That's what Jahan Dotson brings to the table, in addition to all the other things that I've already talked about. He's a tremendous route runner, one of the better route runners in this draft class. He is a technician, so you're getting that in addition to hands, quickness, speed, all of the things that you want in a wide receiver. Again, the only thing that you can knock him on is his size. There's a lack of physicality, especially at the line of scrimmage, but he can win with quickness off the line of scrimmage, and he'll get even better at his releases off the line of scrimmage when players want to come up and delete the airspace and really get into his grill. He's going to learn how to defeat them immediately off the line of scrimmage and win. And he's one of those guys, once he gets on top of you, it's hard for you to then make up that ground. So I'll be anxious to see him continue to grow as a receiver, but he comes into the league with a really complete skill set as is. So you should be excited about this selection, and then the value that you were able to get by trading back and picking up more picks. It was a win for Washington in the first round. And so love this selection. Love the player that we're getting. You add him to the mix of what we already have in Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel, and all of a sudden now this is a very formidable group at wide receiver. Not to mention you still have Cam Sims and De'Ami Brown. I love the fact that this is a young group of receivers that will continue to grow for the next 4 to 5 years. Curtis Samuel is only under contract for 2 more years. We'll see what happens when his contract is up, but Terry's about to get probably about a 5-year deal, if I had to guess. You've got De'Ami Brown under contract for another 3 years, and now you got Jahan Dotson under contract for another 5 years. So this is a young group and young nucleus of receivers that can grow together. And whomever's at quarterback, we're hoping it's Carson Wentz long term, but if it's not, whomever's under center, they're going to have a bevy of options to get the football to. If this group can stay healthy and work together, they will be one of the worst groups to have to defend in the NFL. And so Jahan Dotson adds a ton of value to the Washington Commanders wide receiver core. Great pick by Washington in the first round. Jahan Dotson, wide receiver out of Penn State. You go to the second round with Washington. They sat at 47. Recall, they traded with the Indianapolis Colts for Carson Wentz. Part of that deal was swapping twos. Washington had the 42nd pick initially in the draft. The Colts had the 47th pick. Part of the deal in the Carson Wentz trade was that Washington would move back to 47 and the Indianapolis Colts would move up to 42. So Washington sat at 47, and this is what they spent the 47th overall pick in the draft on. Not what, but who. Excuse me. It was Infiderian Mathis, defensive tackle out of Alabama. This is a big, big man. And, you know, there's a type for Washington. There's a specific type of defensive tackle that they like. And it's apparent. They come from Alabama. They're right around that 6'2 to 6'4 range, right in that 100 to 315 pound range. And they're stout, they're athletic, and they're guys that give you maximum effort. That's what you're getting here in Infiderian Mathis, 6'4", 310-pound defensive tackle. I was not a huge fan of the pick when it was initially made. I thought he was a guy you could probably get in the third round. I can't say that with 100% certainty. I can't confirm or nor deny that. I don't know if he would have been around if Washington passes up on him at 47. Would he have been there 51 picks later at 98? Who's to say? And Washington didn't want to take that chance, knowing that they didn't have any depth at defensive tackle, knowing that they only had the Bama Wall as the two guys on the roster at the current moment before the selection. They said we need to address defensive tackle. It's a thin draft class of tackles. If we wait, the guy that we want and covet may not be there. I get all of that, and so they pulled the trigger. You'll never really hear me complain nor criticize a team for getting a guy when they feel the need to get their guy, although I did think this was a bit early for him. That being said, let's talk about what they're getting. They're getting a guy. First thing I noticed with him is you get maximum effort on every single snap, on every single rep that this guy is on the field. He's going 110 miles an hour no matter if he can make a play or not. Guys like him find themselves in the right position at the right time because they're always hustling to the football. He could be 10 yards away from a running back that's trying to break tackles. He's busting his ass to get there, even though he knows more likely than not he won't be involved in the tackle. But if that ball shakes free, it's a guy like Infiderian Mathis that's going to recover it. He's always hustling. You see guys, they initially rush on a play, they get stalemated, and they just kind of play pity-pat with the tackle or guard or the center as they can't get up the field. He's one of those guys, he's just going to keep working. He's going to continue to work. And if that quarterback is back there dancing around and he's eluding rushers, Infiderian Mathis is eventually going to get there because he's going to continue to rush on the play. So the first thing I noticed is he's got an unlimited motor. Okay, while he's on the field, he's giving you 110% at all times. The next thing that I noticed, when he's square, when he's square to the line of scrimmage, he's immovable. He's not a guy you're going to be able to move. He stands up to double teams when need be. One-on-one, you're not moving this guy, okay? He'll stand his ground. He'll stack, he'll shed, and then he'll go make a play. So he's one of those guys that in the run game, you're not going to be able to run the football in his direction with consistency. Another thing you notice is that every now and again, you get quickness from this guy off the snap. He'll give you a quick swim move or a quick rip, and he'll be in the backfield looking to harass the running back or the quarterback. So that's something else you get. Now, it's not consistent, but from time to time, you will get that quickness. He's a guy that I talked about this and I said, yeah, he had 9 sacks. I'm interested to see how these sacks were got. You know, how did he bag the quarterback 9 times? And I said, I guarantee you a lot of these are from second and third effort plays where the first guy missed and then he came and he cleaned it up. I was right. So you're not going to get a guy that's going to consistently win, get to the quarterback. He looks like Duron Payne, a bigger version of Duron Payne. He's not as athletically gifted as Duron Payne, but he looks like Duron Payne. He looks like one of these Alabama defensive tackles. He looks like Ashawn Robinson. He looks like Duron Payne. He looks like the kid that got drafted by the Seattle Seahawks, now is, I believe, with the Kansas City Chiefs. All of these Alabama defensive tackles look the same. Jaron Reed. He looks like Jaron Reed. He looks like all of the other Alabama defensive tackles that have come out over the last, 5 to 7 years. He looks like Marcel Darius. They all look alike. They all play similar. And so Washington is getting a quality football player, but they're not getting a needle mover at defensive tackle. But I don't know if that's what they were seeking. I think they were seeking a do your job type of guy that's going to play within the framework of the scheme, that's going to be stout against the run. To me, he's a first and second down defensive tackle, a guy that you look to take off the field on third downs when you're looking to get to the quarterback. I don't think he's a guy that is consistently going to get there. He can collapse the pocket, but that's not something that I saw him do with regularity on film either. So at the end of the day, to me, he's a guy that you look to help you stop the run on first and second downs. And then in obvious passing situations, you pull him off the field, you put a more athletically gifted guy on the field, and you let him rush the quarterback. But he can be on the field in passing situations. But I think what they were looking to do was just to continue to have solid players across the board, continue to have good depth at defensive tackle. He eventually, if they're not going to re-sign Duron Payne, and that's the word that's out on the street right now, we can't confirm nor deny that, but that's the word out on the street, is that Duron Payne is a guy that they're not looking to re-sign. If that is in fact the case, then he'll take over as the starter, in 2023. But for the time being, he will give them some flexibility, but more importantly, he will give them depth at defensive tackle in the upcoming season, and you won't have a drop-off when one of those Alabama players come off the field. Another Alabama player will replace them, Infiderian Mathis. Again, I don't love this pick, okay? It might be, and it's not because he can't play, or as they like to call him, Big Phil is some kind of a slouch. He's not. I just thought that the value here wasn't as great, but I get why they did what they did, and I'm not mad at them. I'm not glad at them, but I'm not mad at them. In the second round, 47th overall, defensive tackle Infiderian Mathis was the selection, and he's going to come in and he will play a ton in his rookie season, and that's what you're looking for from your second round pick. And eventually he will be a starter on this football team, and that's what you're looking for from your second round pick. As we progress into the third round, our final pick of day number 2 of the draft, we stay at Alabama with the Crimson Tide and select running back Brian Robinson Jr. Let's take a look. Brian Robinson Jr. is the kind of back that I like. I've talked about me having an affinity for the upright, running back, not necessarily running upright, but the guys that are a little bit taller at the running back position. I don't know. I think it's just from my love of Eric Dickerson back in the days and him being that tall, upright runner. I've always had an affinity for the taller running backs because most running backs are smaller guys. They want low center of gravity. It's harder to tackle, not as much surface area for you to hit, lower pad level, low man usually wins in the NFL. So tall running backs usually aren't appreciated. But here we're getting a 6'2", 220, 25 pound running back that is a battering ram. You could argue that he is the toughest running back in this draft class to corral and bring down. He might be the best short yardage back in this entire draft class. And I think Washington, and you heard Ron Rivera and Martin Mayhew say this after day number 2 of the draft, and we'll talk more about all that was said from day 1, day 2, and ultimately after the draft was done from Ron Rivera and Martin Mayhew. We will talk about that in a separate video. But one of the things they said after day number 2 of the draft is we got tougher as a football team today. And that's those 2 Alabama players that they selected. Both are tough as nails. And Brian Robinson brings something to the team that we lacked last season, that we had the year before with Peyton Barber. We lost that when Barber was released and signed by the Vegas Raiders. We lost that toughness in the short yardage situations. Antonio Gibson, he just isn't that guy, and it's okay. He's just not that guy. J.D. McKissick he runs physically, but J.D. McKissick isn't that guy either. Brian Robinson Jr. is that guy. And so you're getting that back. But not only is he a short yardage back, I told you after the combine, if you watched my combine coverage, I said, man, I'm really impressed with Brian Robinson's athleticism. I watched him at Alabama, knew he could run, knew there were a lot of things he brought to the table, but I wasn't sure he was going to run what he ultimately ran. He ran like a 4.52, 4.53, something along those lines, which was plenty fast for a guy his size, 6'2", 225, 220. That's plenty fast. So this is a guy that is physical, but not only is physical, can actually, hit the home run. You give him an opportunity, I think he can hit the home run. He's probably going to hit more doubles and triples than he does home runs, but he's capable, and he's a natural runner, something that Antonio Gibson still is not. He's getting better at it, but he's not a natural running back. Brian Robinson is. So there's a lot to like with this pick. He comes in and automatically gives you a backup running back that continues to make you feel confident about the running back position. Should something happen to Gibby, whether it's injury related or he isn't holding on to the football and he's going through one of those, ball security crisis, you've got a guy that can step in there. J.D. McKissick doesn't have to have his role altered in any way, shape, or form. Remember, at the end of the season last year, when J.D. McKissick went down and Gibby not necessarily was struggling, but you could tell he was hampered a bit. At the end of the season, we didn't have another option. I mean, Jaret Patterson is cool. No one's afraid of Jaret Patterson. This guy here and Brian Robinson Jr. offers you a big-time backup option to Antonio Gibson that doesn't disrupt the rest of the running back room. And so I really like what they did here with this selection, and I could tell that they missed. I told you guys we were going to miss Peyton Barber. A lot of you were like, come off of this Peyton Barber thing, Louie T. Let it go. The guy was averaging 2.7 yards a carry. Leave it alone, okay? Peyton Barber isn't all that good. Jaret Patterson is better. And I kept telling y'all, it's not about Jaret Patterson being better. It's about Jaret Patterson being tougher, about Jaret Patterson getting the tough yards on 3rd and 1. A lot of you underestimate the value of 3rd and 4th and 1 and 3rd and short and 4th and short. You don't convert those. A lot of times you don't win games in this league. We didn't convert those at a high enough clip last season. And I thought a big part of the reason why was there was no more Peyton Barber, that tough hammer, nail type of running back that you put in that situation. And no matter what, whether there's instant penetration, whether there's contact at the line of scrimmage, no matter what happens, he's going to find a way to fall forward and get that yard that you need to move the sticks. We lacked that last year. We're getting it back here in Brian Robinson. And then some. Don't just look at him as a short yardage back. He provides much more than that. But his calling card is that he'll immediately come in here and carve out a niche for himself as a tremendous short yardage running back. But don't be surprised if he starts to eat away at Gibby's carries if things aren't going well in that department for Washington and they start to like what they see from the rookie Brian Robinson Jr. He brings a lot to the table, but I'm very excited about the prospects of him getting in there in some short yardage situations. Love this pick for Washington. Thought this was an outstanding pickup. And we knew they were interested. We talked about this. I talked about them and how many interviews and visits that they had that were with running backs. I said, they're coming away. One of the things I guaranteed this draft was that they were coming away with a running back, and they did it in the 3rd round in the form of Brian Robinson Jr. So now we move on to day number 3. Washington gets day number 3 kicked off by addressing the secondary with a safety option. Let's take a look. So Percy Butler was the pick, safety out of Louisiana. This is a guy that gives me some of those Daxton Hill type vibes in terms of his size and what you can do with him. He is a safety, but he has a cornerback build at 6 feet, 194. So he kind of is like a hybrid, but the one thing that Percy Butler brings to the table that's eye-popping, the first thing you notice is his speed. Speed! 4.36 40, one of the fastest times at the combine for a defender. in the 2022 NFL draft class. He can flat out run. He can range all over the football field. You saw a lot of him playing, deep half. There were times where he would drop back and be the single high safety, which he is fully capable of with that 4.36 40. Then you would see him in some man-to-man coverage situations where he's running across the field with a receiver. You would see him at times coming down as a box defender, and you'd see him blitz. I loved him as a blitzer. I didn't think they blitzed him quite enough at Louisiana. Then you would see him take on the flats in some cover 3 coverages as the down defender, and he would take out the flat, running back going into the flats as a flare. He would take it away. So you saw him in multiple coverages, multiple roles, and being asked to do multiple things. So you saw the versatility of a Percy Butler. I love his speed. I love his click and close ability, meaning when he sticks his foot in the ground and comes downhill to attack the football, it's in an instant. All right, it's in an instant. So you see that his ability to drive on the football and break up passes is outstanding. You like that about him. He's a guy that I think does a lot of the little things well, but then there's some things that he's still learning how to adapt to. And so, like, I liken him to a superhero that's just figuring out that he's got superpowers and he's still learning how to use them. So the reason I say that and I use that analogy is because he's so damn fast. It's almost like he just woke up yesterday and realized, damn, I'm fast now. Like, he was slow before, he's fast now, and he's trying to figure out how to use his speed. And one of the ways that you see this manifest itself on the field, and it's very frustrating, is when he comes up to make a tackle. This guy is often out of control, or as I like to say, he's OC, out of control. And I mean, literally, you'll see a blur just appear on your screen out of nowhere, and you're like, okay, that's Percy. And then as Percy approaches, Percy passes. Okay, Percy continues to go. The guy gives him a quick move. Percy slips off of him. Percy doesn't even touch him. Goes flying by. He doesn't come under control. He's flying down at 110 miles an hour, and he doesn't put on the brakes. And so that usually either lends itself to him making a physical tackle or a very dramatic and flamboyant miss. But it's a miss nonetheless, and then another 8 yards are gained before that guy's escorted out of bounds. So that's something he's going to have to clean up. But I love the fact that he's playing with reckless abandon, that he's coming up looking to hit anything that moves. Again, super fast, really good in coverage, love his ability. I think this is a really good pick, and I think what they're looking at with him is he to me would be the replacement for a guy like Bobby McCain, right? Now, if you're looking to play a 3 safety look, I think he could come in immediately and play, and that would allow Cam Curl to go to play your Buffalo nickel for you, which is what Cam Curl did in his rookie season. Okay, Cam Curl played a ton of that Buffalo nickel. If you recall, Cam Curl had the pick 6 against the 49ers, okay, in that rookie season. That was him playing Buffalo nickel, underneath defender, out in the flats, taking away the tight end, down by the box, making tackles on running backs. Cam Curl is adept at doing that. I think they love Cam Curl as a chess piece. I don't know if they want to just necessarily slot him into Buffalo nickel. I think they want to be able to move him around, and they still will. But if they go to that 3 safety look like they did so often last season, and they want to bring somebody into that Buffalo nickel role, it'll be Cam Curl. And I think you can slide Percy Butler into one of those safety roles so that you don't have to worry about, putting someone out there that may be a liability. So I think Butler gives you that versatility. He's also one of the best special teams players in this draft. He had a blocked kick last season, a blocked punt. So this is a guy that he does so much for you in the special teams game, but also adds value. Unlike last year when we drafted the kid out of Cincinnati, the safety, that I was like, yeah, he's a super special teams player, but I don't really see the value here as a defender. I don't trust him out on the football field as a defender. I don't feel that way this year with Percy Butler. I think you could put this guy on the field in his rookie season and get results from him. So I like what he brings to the table. He's a very disciplined defender on the back end. Sometimes I think he takes too long to react, but it's because he wants to see it first. If he can get a little bit more instinctual, and that comes with film study and understanding what offenses are trying to do, he gets more comfortable, then he can unlock that speed. He could become really problematic on the back end, and I could see him being a great replacement for Bobby McCain in the near future as a full-time starter at free safety. So this is a guy that they drafted to give you depth at the safety position right away, gives you a dominant, not a good, a dominant player as a special teams player. If he can come in and fill that void right away, I don't know if they're going to look to move on from Troy Apke, but if they were looking to potentially do that, if they were looking to not have to have a role that a guy is filling on the roster specifically for just special teams, that they were looking to move away from that, this is a guy that would allow you to do that, to move away from a Troy Apke because of his ability to play special teams. I don't think they're looking to move on from Troy Apke because of what he brings. You have to have fiends and demons on special teams, and Troy Apke is one of those guys. But Percy Butler is also one of those types of players as well. So really like this selection. Love what he brings to the table from a depth perspective, from a special teams perspective, from a speed perspective. And I like that he gives them another option at the safety position in the upcoming season and for many years to come. So solid selection to kick off the fourth round for Washington. Day number 3, their first selection, 113th overall, safety Percy Butler out of Louisiana. So this is where the second and final trade for Washington in the 2022 NFL draft takes place. They were on the clock at 120 because of that Saints deal, as we talked about earlier in the draft, where they traded back, picked up 2 picks, swapped first rounders, picked up an additional 2 picks, 98 overall in the third round, which they spent on Brian Robinson Jr., and then 120. This was going to be the pick. They instead saw an opportunity to move back. Carolina wanted to move up, so they packaged up 120, which is in the 4th round, and 189, which was in the 6th round, and gave that to Carolina in order to pick up 2 5th-round picks. They got the very first pick in the 5th round, 144, and then they were back on the clock 5 selections later at 149. So the very first pick of the 5th round, 144 overall, and then 149 right after that, about 5 or 6 picks later. So Washington put themselves in a position to get more value in the mid rounds. Martin Mayhew told you that's what he was looking to do. Didn't want 2 6th round or 2 7th rounders and a 6th rounder. He preferred 2 5th rounders, no 6th rounder, and the 2 7s. And so it worked out better for Washington. Why? Because they were able to do this. They were able to draft quarterback Sam Howell out of North Carolina at pick 144 in the 5th round. So you say to yourself, well, they could have done that at 120 in the 4th round, but this is what we talk about when we talk about value. Now, Washington couldn't have been assured that Sam Howell was going to be there. I think they were probably floored and surprised at the fact that he was still there in the 5th round. And they said, we can't turn down this type of value. This is a guy that we rated pretty highly at the quarterback position. We weren't interested in pursuing quarterback early in this draft, but had we been interested, had there been no Carson Wentz trade, this is a guy that we would have looked at in the 2nd round potentially as a quarterback option. No worse than 3rd round, and here we are in the 5th round, and he still hasn't been taken. Well, we'll end that right now and turn the card in with Sam Howell's name on it. So Washington could have gotten him in the 4th round, but why when you can get him in the 5th round? This is what I talk about when I say value. When you pass up on a player in a round and he's still available the next time you come up on the clock, that's when you get good value. They did it here with Sam Howell. Maybe they were entertaining the thought of taking him in the 4th round. They passed up on that opportunity, picked up more draft capital in a much more beneficial spot in the 5th round, 2 5th-rounders instead of a 4th, and then not having another selection until the 6th. They get 2 picks in the 5th round, so more concentrated area in the draft. One of those picks, Sam Howell, quarterback out of UNC. We've talked about him already. I've done a breakdown on Sam Howell already, so if you want an extensive breakdown of his game, go watch my Draft Prospects 101 breakdown of quarterback Sam Howell. This is a guy that I told you was one of the wild cards of this draft. When I looked at his game, there's a lot to like with Sam Howell. And I talked about that the fact that this was a guy that was a preseason Heisman Trophy, leader, and going into the season in 2020. And remember, he had that big year in 2019, got a lot of people excited, had another really solid year in 2020, but it was a step back. There was a lot of expectations for that Carolina program in 2020, and they were solid. They won a bunch of games. They made it to a bowl game. They played well, but then they lost a lot of guys. They were really talented, was Carolina, and Sam Howell was a big part of that, with De'Ami Brown and Daz Newsome and all of those guys, and the running backs, Javonte Williams and Michael Carter. All of those guys were huge contributors. They all went to the NFL in 2021. And so then Sam Howell had to do it by himself. The offensive line was in shambles, and he lost a lot of production from the receiver position and the running back position, and his game suffered. They lost their very first game of the season to Virginia Tech, and it kind of just was one of those seasons that just didn't go well. But I thought Sam Howell showed some other things because of his lack of trust in some of those targets, that those new guys that were there, and not having the same kind of safety net, if you will, at the running back position to just turn around and hand it off to Michael Carter or Javonte Williams. Sam Howell went from a guy that never had more than 200 yards rushing in any given season in his career to 800 and some change in his final year on the campus of North Carolina. All right. And so that at Chapel Hill, that's a pretty big, lofty number for a guy that had never really been a huge toter of the rock. He went from a non-factor, a guy that you didn't have to really keep tabs on as a runner, to this dynamic athlete at the quarterback position. So I thought that was one of the things that he really showed in his final year. There's a lot of things that people want to see him improve upon as a passer. And I've talked about some of those things. Again, go watch my Draft Prospects 101 video of Sam Howell. But there are a lot of things that people like from Sam Howell. I think his deep ball was among the best in this draft class. You give him an opportunity to rip it deep, and he will drop that thing in the bucket. So there's a lot of things to like with Sam Howell. And I think there are a number of things that he can, improve upon, which is why he was here in the 5th round. But for a lot of watch, so I put out a poll asking everyone out there on Twitter what they thought about the selection. How did they feel? And the options were something to the effect of, you thought that this was a bad move. You didn't think this was a smart move at all. The next option was this was a smart move. You love this pick. Another option was this was unnecessary. You already had Carson Wentz. You didn't need to do this. And then the final option was like, I didn't even like this guy as a prospect. Didn't like the pick, essentially. So of those 4 options, it was a runaway. I mean, it was 90%, an overwhelming, and the voter turnout, it was something like 300 and some odd votes. So it was a good turnout for a little quick poll that I threw up. And over 90% of you said that this was a smart move. You love it. And I think this is indicative of how we feel about Carson Wentz. Like, we're not sure about him. A lot of you out there didn't like the trade at all, think this guy's a bum, and didn't want him here in Washington. So for that crowd out there, they're saying, hell yeah, go get reassurance. Go get us an insurance policy in case this shit doesn't work. And then the rest of us who do want to see this Carson Wentz thing kind of take place, and hopefully it works out for us. But if it doesn't, we, in the back of our minds, even though we're rooting for Carson Wentz and we want it to work, in the back of our mind, we're saying, hey, there's a realistic shot and chance that this shit doesn't go well with Carson Wentz. And in the event that happens, it's good to know that there's a guy that is waiting in the wings, continuing to develop, that will get an opportunity. And it also forces, it puts Washington in a position where it doesn't force them to have to do something rash and crazy next year in the event that this Carson Wentz thing doesn't work. We talked about not having the draft capital. This Wentz thing could end up turning into a 2nd round pick. And just not wanting to have to mortgage the future to go up and get a quarterback, in next year's draft class. And it will be a competitive field. We won't be the only team if we're in that boat that needs a quarterback. There are going to be several other teams that are going to look to try to trade up to get one of these big-time QBs, which this draft lacked. Next year's draft won't lack star power at the quarterback position. And it will be multiple teams looking to get up, and you will have to give up a lot because you're bidding against other teams. Now we won't find ourselves in that predicament now that we have Sam Howell on the roster. And worst case scenario, Howell turns out to be a marginal NFL starter or a high-level backup, and then you can replace Taylor Heineke with Sam Howell. So at the end of the day, you got 3 quarterbacks on the roster. They said they wanted another quarterback. They were going to take a quarterback, whether it be in the undrafted free agent route or they were going to take a guy late in the draft. They did not anticipate Sam Howell falling to them. They just didn't. I love this selection. I love the flexibility that it gives us. And there's a level of comfort that you have now at quarterback that didn't exist before, which was, hey, if this Carson Wentz thing doesn't work, you don't have to panic. We got another guy. And look, this guy may not work out either, but at least there's another guy waiting in the wings. If this Carson Wentz thing does work, then cool. We got Sam Howell, and maybe we'll be able to develop him and flip him for a second-round pick for someone that's quarterback needy and they see talent in Sam Howell's development. So either way, this can be beneficial to Washington. But just knowing that we have that, it's rare that we have that. We haven't had that since 2012 when we drafted Robert Griffin III and then drafted Kirk Cousins as well. We haven't had this kind of comfort, security blanket, safety net, if you will, since 2012. It's a very refreshing feeling. And now I want to see how this whole situation transpires and plays itself out. Now, I did tweet out, shit just got interesting with this move because Ron Rivera, he did contact Carson Wentz. He did let him know what they were planning to do. And Wentz knows what's going on. And I'm going to tell you right now, if Carson Wentz is affected by a 5th round selection, he's not the right man for the job. Just going to tell you flat out. If they would have made this pick in the 2nd round, then you could say, all right, shit, they really aren't all in on Carson Wentz. They took a 5th round pick and spent it on the quarterback. Not a day 1, not a day 2 pick. They spent a 5th round pick on the quarterback. If that's enough to rattle Carson Wentz's cage, he doesn't need to be our starting quarterback anyway. He's not mentally tough enough to handle the position. So I don't see anything wrong with what was done here. And I love the fact that they reached out to Wentz, let him know what was going on. And so the stage has been set. Wentz knows what's at stake. I've already said, even before this was done, that this was his last chance, his swan song, if you will, to be the unquestioned starter in the NFL in any destination, in any stop. This was it. He doesn't take advantage of this, he won't get another opportunity to be the unquestioned starter in the NFL. So he knows what's at risk. He knows what he has to do. And now it adds a little bit of extra pressure knowing that they drafted a guy in the 5th round that they liked a lot in this draft class. But you can keep him right where he is right now on the bench as an afterthought if you come out and ball. So the stage has been set. Shit just got real and interesting. And I can't wait. Bart Scott, can't wait. Love this selection of Sam Howell in the 5th round at 144. What says you? We move on to the next 5th round pick that was gained in that trade with the Carolina Panthers. 149th overall. Here's what Washington decided to do with that selection. So Washington, here's what we thought they were going to do. I've talked about this ad nauseum. How many times did you hear me utter the name Cole Turner, during this process? How many times did you hear me utter the name Cole Turner? I said they met with Cole Turner. I said that phrase, that line, at least 12 times. They met with Cole Turner. They met with Jaden Wademeyer, who didn't get drafted and ended up signing in UDFA with the Buffalo Bills. It seems like the Bills are always interested in the same players that we are. Isn't that just interesting? Anyway, I said they interviewed Jaden Wademeyer. They had a visit with Cole Turner. These are guys that they're interested in. I said they're not going to draft a tight end in the 3rd round. I said the first time that they will entertain the tight end position will be the 4th round. I don't think they're going to spend an early pick. And I think this is a pick, this here pick, which was a 6th rounder before they traded. This would have been the pick they would have divulged to the tight end position. So they just happened to do it a little bit earlier. Cole Turner is a guy that they were very intrigued by at Nevada. And I told you, I ran into Cole Turner watching Carson Strong. How could you not? If you watched Carson Strong, he had about 2 or 3 guys that he really trusted to get the football to. Romeo Dobbs was one of the other guys. And then you had, or Romeo Dubs, excuse me. And then, this was another guy, one of his favorite targets, especially in the red zone, was tight end Cole Turner. And I talked about his size, 6'6", 246. This was a guy that was a wide receiver at Nevada. Going into the 2020 season, they made the switch to tight end, and he's played the tight end position for the last 2 seasons. 2020 was his first year as a tight end. Then he was tight end in 2021, and that's when he kind of exploded in terms of his touchdown production. 10 touchdowns for the Nevada Wolfpack in 2021. That got on my radar because this guy was making all kinds of acrobatic catches. He's got long arms. He's got a tremendous catch radius. He knows how to use his body, tremendous body control for a tight end. There's a lot to like here. And again, a guy that can climb the ladder and go and get the football. We keep talking about needing bigger targets. This is a guy that gives you a bigger target. And unlike a Logan Thomas, who is more of an inline wide tight end, this is a detachable U type of tight end in Cole Turner. Again, ex-wide receiver background, very comfortable lining up out wide or in the slot, getting one-on-one coverage from a safety or a linebacker. This is the kind of guy that gives you that mismatch nightmare type of situation that you're looking for, that the rest of the league is taking advantage of, that we have kind of been slow to get to. This is a guy that will give you an opportunity to potentially do that. So there's a lot to like with Cole Turner. So those are all the pros. Tremendous hands, will go up and get the football, excellent catch radius, tremendous body control, really solid athlete. Not going to knock your socks off or blow your doors off with his athleticism, but it's plenty good. He can run, he can jump, he can catch, he can do all the things that we're looking for him to do as a receiver. Where he's lacking is as a blocker in the physicality department. When linebackers get into his chest, he's still got that wide receiver mentality. So he's still adjusting to the physicality that comes with playing tight end. That's something that he'll have to continue to get better at. Guys stack him up down the field and get into his body. He doesn't do a good enough job of fighting that contact off and playing through that contact sometimes. So he's got to continue to get stronger. He will. That's part of why you draft a guy this late in the draft, is because you want to work with him. You want to get him stronger. You want to get him in your weight training program. You want to get him on your nutritional plan. You want to get him to a point where he starts to rock up a bit. And I think they will. But you don't want him to lose his athleticism. You don't want him to lose his pass catching prowess. And so we needed TE2. That was a big need for us in this draft class. We got it knocked down here with Cole Turner. I like this pick. I do like this pick. I talked about Cole Turner as a guy that you could get later on in the draft, and that he would provide us with something that we needed. We keep talking about needing size. Well, you got Logan Thomas, who's 6'6". Add Cole Turner to the mix. He's 6'6". All right. And so John Bates is 6'5". You got a bunch of big tight ends. So worst case scenario, you need a big tree to bail you out. We got another one here in Cole Turner. So I like this pick. I think right now, if I were to guess, he'd be TE3. Okay. I think John Bates is sliding into that TE2 role, and Turner isn't ready to be TE2 yet. He'll be TE3, and he'll continue to learn and develop and grow. And we'll see. He could even be TE4, which means he's on the practice squad because they really like the development of Sammis Reyes. Who's to say? I don't want to count Sammis Reyes out. He's continuing to work and develop. But Cole Turner is definitely in the mix. I like that group of tight ends that we have now. 4 guys that really bring different elements and skill sets to the table, and you put them all together, and may the best 3 guys win. And I think they're ultimately going to keep 3 on the roster like they did last year. And let's see which 3 emerge out of that group of 4. We know 2 of them for sure, Logan Thomas and John Bates. Who's going to be that 3rd tight end? Is it Sammis Reyes or is it Cole Turner? Both of them are raw. Turner just started playing the position 2 years ago. Sammis Reyes last year was his first time playing the tight end position. So they're both extremely raw. Who's going to make it to the finish line first? I can't wait to see. But this is another guy that I'm excited about in this draft class. And you knock down another need on the roster here in the 5th round. 149th overall, with tight end Cole Turner out of Nevada. So now we go to the 7th round, where our final 2 selections were made. The first of which was of offensive line depth quality. I told you we were going to go offensive line late in the draft. I kept drafting Cordell Volson out of North Dakota State. Why did I keep drafting him? Because I told you, and I told you guys this at least 10 times during day 2 of the draft party. I said, we're going to take an offensive lineman at the end of this draft, whether it be the 6th round or one of those 7th round picks. I said, we're going to take an offensive lineman, and I guarantee you this lineman would have played tackle in college, but is probably better suited to play guard. I guarantee you this tackle would have played, or this offensive lineman would have played tackle. He's going to offer us positional flex, as we know, he loves him some positional flex. I said, I guarantee you this guy is going to have played tackle in his career in college, and is probably better suited to play guard. Here's what Washington did. So Washington takes offensive lineman Chris Paul, all right, out of Tulsa in the 7th round. And this was a guy that I looked at, and first thing I wanted to see was, what did he do? What did he play? And in 2021, he had 9 starts at right tackle and 1 start at left tackle. So he didn't play any guard in 2021. He played primarily tackle in 2020, had like 1 or 2 starts at guard in 2020. He primarily played tackle in 2019, had about 3 or 4 starts at guard. So this is a guy that really spent most of his time in the collegiate ranks as a tackle. There's not a ton of guard tape out there. And so Washington did exactly what I thought they were going to do. They took a guy that essentially was a tackle, but they project him to be a guard. Here's why he's going to more likely than not be a guard at the next level. One, he's 6'4". And generally speaking, if you got a guy that's 6'4", he's probably going to produce shorter arms, which is a turnoff for teams at the tackle position, which is why I thought Sadiq Charles was going to be, I was excited about him, wanted to give him a chance, but Sadiq Charles was like 6'3", 6'4", and not the biggest guy in the world. I'm like, he doesn't come equipped with long arms. That's usually a depth sentence for anybody trying to play tackle at the NFL level. So Chris Paul kind of falls into that category, but that's not why he's probably more likely than not a guard. His lateral quickness is an issue. He doesn't move his feet laterally all that well. He moves it well enough, but it can be an issue, especially when he gets going in one direction, gets that 323-pound frame moving in one direction, and then a guy crosses over and goes inside on him. He struggles to then stop, redirect, and go back inside. So he's going to be better served being inside, where he's got bodies around him to the both sides of him, center on the left side of him or the right side of him, and then a tackle on the opposite side, where there's not as much space for a guy to maneuver and not as much space for him to have to cover by himself. Whereas when you're at a tackle position, you're on an island essentially, especially if you don't have any help from a running back on the way out chipping or in the backfield or a tight end. When you're out there, you're on an island, and that's where a lot of these guys get embarrassed, or they have holding penalties because there's a lot of space to cover. And if you make a mistake and the guy in front of you is talented, you can get beat. And so his tape is not terrible tape at tackle either. I mean, again, he does a solid job of keeping guys in front of him, putting hands on guys. I think his punch sometimes is a little bit inconsistent, but at the end of the day, I actually was pleased with some of the tape that I saw from him at tackle. There were times where guys beat him around the corner and he needed a little bit of help from the guard who came over and helped push that guy around the pocket. But for the most part, I watched him against Ohio State. That's a great tape to watch. He's playing against elite athletes. I watched him against Houston. Another guy that got drafted into the NFL relatively early in the 2nd round was Logan Hall out of Houston. You see him go up against Logan Hall a little bit. So there were some really good matchups for you to see him and his athleticism. One of the things you didn't get to see enough of because he was at the tackle position is him getting to the 2nd level. But when you did see him, and there were a couple of times, even in that Ohio State game, he ended up moving to guard for a couple of snaps. You get to see him pull out and get up the field. The guy ran a 4.89 40 at the combine. So he's an athlete, but that's in a straight line. When you get him moving sideways, the athleticism and the agility just doesn't compute to that straight line speed. So I like him. I think he's going to be a good developmental offensive lineman that comes in and gives you some depth. There are some questions about that lateral quickness. He didn't get bull rushed a ton. So I want to see if he anchors down well and how does he respond to a guy just straight up trying to own him. A guy trying to straight up disrespect him and destroy him in a bull rush fashion. I want to see how much sand he has in his pants. Didn't really get to see that a ton. I didn't really see him stand up to the bull rush. A lot of guys were trying to beat him with speed and quickness. So there's some questions. But this, of course, there are questions. He's a 7th round pick. But this was another position that Washington needed to address in the draft, and they did it. And you got to give them kudos because we came into this draft with 6 selections. We leave with 8, and we talked about all these different positions: offensive line and corner and tight end and quarterback and running back and linebacker and defensive tackle and receiver and all of these positions that we listed that needed to be addressed via the draft. And the only one that they didn't take out of all those positions was a linebacker. So you get you an offensive lineman here in the 7th round that's going to offer you positional flex, guard tackle combo, Chris Paul out of Tulsa here in the 7th round. And to round out this draft, Washington spent their 8th and final pick, the 2nd of the 7th round, on a cornerback, another position that we felt like needed to be addressed in this draft. They spend it on a cornerback out of Oklahoma State, Christian. So Christian Holmes is the pick. 6 foot, 201 pound corner, physical specimen. You watch him and he looks the part. He looks like he could be a safety. I mean, he's bigger than the safety we drafted in Percy Butler in the 4th round. He's rocked up. He's a physically built guy, so you like that. He's aggressive at the line of scrimmage. He'll come up and challenge you. A lot of his best work, however, is done when he's playing off as a zone coverage corner where he can key eyes on the quarterback and kind of keep everything in front of him and then plant and drive on the football. But he's not afraid to come up, get in your face, delete the airspace, and be really disruptive at the line of scrimmage. But the problem with that is when you get a corner like that wants to be disruptive at the line of scrimmage, that isn't a speed demon, which he is not. He ran a 4.5 240 at his pro day. When you get guys like that, you have to be careful because if a receiver gets on top of you, you don't have the makeup speed to then negate the rough start to the play and rep with the whiff at the line of scrimmage. So that's something he'll have to be careful of. But Ron Rivera has shown us time and time again that he doesn't care about top end speed as much as he cares about awareness, physicality, and length. More so than anything else, length. And this guy Christian Holmes has that length that you look for at the cornerback position. Remember, Benjamin St. Juste was another guy that was not a speed merchant. Last year, he ran like a 4.5. I want to say it was a 4.52 as well, maybe 4.53, something in that general vicinity. And they took him because he was 6'3" with long arms. This guy is 6 feet with longer arms and physical in his play. So he'll come up and hit you. I enjoyed his Missouri tape more so than his Oklahoma State tape. I actually went back to 2018 because I was intrigued by that season. He had 12 pass breakups in 2018, excuse me. Do you understand how hard it is in a college football season to have 12 PBUs? So I was dying to go back and watch him in 2018. And it was fun to watch because when you go back that far, you're seeing all kinds of guys that are now studs in the NFL. And you're like, okay, he's taking on NFL talent and he's holding his own. He's going up against Deebo Samuel at South Carolina. He's going up against Jawan Jennings from Tennessee, who's now with the San Francisco 49ers. You watch him against Van Jefferson in 2020 for the Florida Gators. Like, you see him against all of these NFL talents in the SEC, and you're like, wow, this is impressive. So he can hold his own. You see him playing against NFL talent players, and I like what this kid can bring to the table, man. I think there's something here. One of the knocks on him and something that I wasn't too excited about was he doesn't always find the football in flight. Okay, when you get into a trail technique, this is where the confidence is shown. If you're confident in your ability, you look back and you find the football because you know I can keep up with this dude. I got him in my hip pocket. I'm gonna stack him, and then I'm gonna go locate. But if you are one of these guys doesn't trust your speed, you're panicking, your back's turned, the guy's got a step or two on you, and you're just dying to get back into play, so you can't afford to turn around and look. So you get the face guarders. That's where you get the guys that want to rake at the arm. And some of these guys are taught that. That's the principle that's being taught, okay? The technique that's being taught is don't turn around and look for the football. You may turn around, the ball might already be over your head. You just see him reacting to the football, and then you rake down at the arms, and you try to rake that football out of there. There are a couple of plays like that where he was actually successful in doing that and getting the football out of there and dislodging it. But I prefer my corners to locate football because, again, I'm more excited about an interception than I am a pass breakup. Again, if it's 3rd and 7 and you get a pass breakup, that's just as good as a turnover because you're going to get us back the football. You're going to get the football back to the offense. But I'd much rather on 2nd and 7 have you pick it off than pass breakup because 3rd and 7 could easily turn into a 12-yard gain and a refreshing of the sticks. And now they've got a chance to keep the drive alive. So I want you to locate ball. He doesn't always do that, but he's willing to come up and run support. He's a very willing and physical tackler. He is a very confident corner at the line of scrimmage, does not mind putting hands on you. He's a good press and bail guy. He can get off. I think he's better in zone coverage, and that's primarily what we play here in Washington is zone, keeping everything in front of us. And I think that's part of what attracted him to Ron Rivera, Jack Del Rio, and company is his ability in zone coverage, keep quarterback's eyes, keep the play in front of him, plant and drive, make a play on football. So like this selection, especially for the 7th round, get a physical guy that a lot of people think could convert to safety. If corner doesn't work out for him, he's got a second life in the NFL as a safety. And I can see that with the physicality, with the physical build, with his no-nonsense tackling style. I could easily see him making a transition to safety and playing that role well. But right now, he's a corner. That's the way we're going to treat him. And I want to give him every opportunity to prove he can get it done at the cornerback position before we start talking about moving him elsewhere. So in the 7th round, Christian Holmes, cornerback out of Oklahoma State, transferred from Missouri after spending 5 years with Missouri. So this is an older guy. As you can see, I talked about 2018 tape. His first year in college was 2017. All right. Played sparingly in 17. Then there was 2018. He sits out the 2019 season with an injury, comes back, plays well in 2020, gets the COVID year, re-eligibility that a lot of guys took advantage of, goes back to school, but transfers to Oklahoma State and plays well for the Cowboys in his final year in college football. So a lot to like. You know what? I might have misspoke. I think his first year in college was 2016. I think he was 2016, gets injured in 2017, doesn't play that year red shirts, comes back, has a phenomenal 2018 year, which is what I watched a lot of, which was a lot of fun. 2019, 2020 was supposed to be his final year in college. Everyone got that extra year of eligibility for COVID if you wanted to take advantage of it. He did. He transferred as he was, already a graduate at Oklahoma State, transfers over, or at Missouri, he transfers over to Oklahoma State and has one more season there. So this guy's probably already 24, years old or whatever the case may be. But I like a lot of what I saw from Christian Holmes. So that wraps up Washington's 2022 NFL draft class. It's a whale of a group. You guys tell me what you think about this draft class. 8 players, a lot of needs in positions that lacked depth were met in this draft. You traded back twice, picked up draft capital in the key rounds that they talked about going into the draft, about really liking rounds 2 through 5. Washington went into the draft with only 2 picks in rounds 2 through 5, one in the 2nd round and one in the 4th round. Okay. They leave this draft with, I think, 5 of their 8 selections being in rounds 2 through 5, where they felt like the most value was. a pick in the second, a pick in the third, a pick in the fourth, 2 in the fifth. So they really took advantage of what they thought was the sweet spot of this draft class. And they even come away with a quarterback that they were really high on and had highly rated on their board in Sam Howell in the 5th round. It was a really well-rounded draft for Washington. I think they got a lot of guys that are going to provide depth, but they also got some guys that can come in and help right away. Jahan Dotson, clearly your first-round pick, going to make an impact right away. Infiderian Mathis, a second-round selection, going to have an impact right away. I think you can even look at a guy like Brian Robinson Jr., going to have an impact right away. Percy Butler, going to have an impact. Even if it's only on special teams right away, he's going to have an impact in his rookie season, I believe, as a defender. So you're looking at those first 4 picks as guys that are going to come in and I think have an immediate impact on his roster. Then you have a guy that could potentially be the savior for the future in Sam Howell in the 5th round. Then you get Cole Turner, another guy, not sure if he's going to have an impact in year 1, but he could, depending on where they slot him, how he develops, and what he shows in camp as a rookie. He could either be TE3 or he could be a first off the bench tight end as a practice squad member. But right now, I think he beats out Sammy Reyes. That's how I see it. But we'll see where Sammy Reyes is in his development year 2, and that will determine where Cole Turner is. So you're getting another guy that may ultimately, and we don't know where Logan Thomas is in his development. He's still coming back in his rehab. He looks like he's coming along nicely, but he's 30 years old, so it's not going to happen as quickly as it would for a 24-year-old. So you may need Cole Turner to start the season off as one of your tight ends. Who's to say? We'll see. And then you get into your 2 7th rounders, Chris Paul, depth purposes. Hopefully we don't see him at all this season. We got enough depth on the offensive line that we can keep him at bay. Hopefully we don't have to see him at all. If we do, that means we have a problem up front. And at the cornerback position, Christian Holmes to wrap up the draft. At the cornerback position, I expect this young fella to make the team. We just don't have, I talked about this the other day, we don't have a lot of depth at cornerback, okay? We do not have a lot of depth at the cornerback position, so I expect him to not only make this football team, but probably have to play sooner rather than later. Like this draft a ton. What says you? Leave it down in the comment section. My name is Louie T, and I approve of the Washington Commanders 2022 NFL Draft. For those of you who are mob members, I think I'm going to give you a grade for this draft. I'm going to do a separate video, just make it real quick, give you a quick grade on this draft for the Commanders. So be on the lookout for that. But in any event, that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T. I am a Washington fan, etched in burgundy and gold. My Washington spirit will never die. Washington spirit will never fold. Until we meet again, post up and take command. You guys, enjoy the rest of your weekend. What a weekend it was. Now, we turn our attention to rookie minis, and then we start preparing ourselves for camp. It's an exciting time. Commander fans, stand up. We in the building. You guys, have a good one.
LouieTeeNetwork.